Hi, everyone. Peldi here, substitute hosting for Steve. It's my first time hosting a podcast, so please be kind. So today I'm joined by Aleth Gueguen, founder of Smart Leads and GDPR for SaaS. Welcome, Aleth.
Oh, nice to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. So for my first episode, I thought I'd pick a topic that very few people enjoy talking about. But luckily, Aleth and I are two such people, and the topic is GDPR. So, Aleth, can you please briefly tell us about yourself and why you decided to start GDPR for SaaS?
Okay, so I'm by trade an independent software consultant. I build software for uh, small and medium companies. And at the first, it was some of my clients asked me about GDPR, and I was at the time very involved in privacy and open data. And so I started to just study this GDPR thing. And it started from here. And then I was asked to talk about it in, I guess it was at FemtoConf first. And yes, people, it was in um, 2018 when the GDPR started being enforced. And so a lot of people had questions, and I was happy to answer them.
Yeah, so you created another consulting business specifically for GDPR, basically.
Yes, and specifically for SaaS business, because I thought this was the people I wanted to help first, was
Yeah,
this
well, I was one of
GDPR
those
thing.
people. That's how we met.
Yeah, I
I
remember.
found
Yes.
you. I found you, and you helped us at Balsamic with some key insights that got us started, and I never forgot. So that's why I decided to invite you as my first guest. So now it's been a few years. It's been about
Yeah.
3 years since
Yes.
it came into effect. Um, how's it going? Are you still getting a lot of requests for help, or is
Uh,
everybody kind of settled?
it's kind of dwindled down a little. I still get some requests from time to time, essentially from SaaS business outside of Europe who wants to get into the European market, and so they have to put their duck in a row.
I see. Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so interesting, interesting. That makes sense. So now, did I know we all worked really hard on it, tried to get as compliant as possible, but um, is it working? Is it being enforced? Are European countries
Uh,
sending
yes.
fines?
Yes, it's being enforced in some ways. Uh, we have to think that what we call the data processing authority. So each country has like a bureau to take care of the GDPR protest, and most of these data processing authority around Europe are very small structure. The biggest one are, I guess, the French and the German one, and UK, but UK is not in UE anymore. So, and the French one, which is in the bigger, one of the biggest, it's only 200 employees. So they don't have a lot of budget to just enforce it everywhere. So what's happening is they do enforce, but when there is really a big breach. And the French one recently fined Google. I guess the fine was around 50 million euro, but now it's just starting to a back and forth fight between trials and
Right.
legal people. So hopefully someday they will pay the fine, but who
Yeah,
knows?
50 million euros for Google is lunch money, but
Yeah,
sure.
yes.
So
So,
it's interesting. So because these national entities that are supposed to enforce GDPR are small, you're
mhm.
saying that they usually try to go after big players where it's worth it. They might get a
Yes,
big.
yes and no, because if we take the example of France, which I know best, sometimes the CNIL, which is a French enforcer, will issue some recommendation or inquiry because someone uh, and uh, and sometimes it's just one person uh, uh, will ask the CNIL, will how you say, put a complaint
Right.
against the CNIL, and for whatever reason they choose to enforce this claim.
Even if it's a small company or a small infringement.
Yes. Well, I had an example of of one of my clients, and they have like 500,000 users, and they made like a blooper in sending a mice email, and
Mm.
someone complained.
Oh,
And
wow.
for whatever reason, it's uh, the complaint landed in some place where they send an inquiry. And
Okay.
well, that's what was all. So we had to work like half an hour, a day to respond to this inquiry saying, okay, we made a blooper. And
Okay. Interesting.
that's
So
all.
that's interesting. So that means that it is being forced at several levels. So
Yes.
that's kind of good news because we made all this work. It's good to know that it's for a reason. It's not just because, right?
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
of course, for us at least, the motivation was not just not getting fined, but it was mostly doing the right thing.
I
So,
hope for you, because
yeah.
I think this is the biggest change with a lot of quotes. It forces a lot of company to take a big hard look at at which data they had and what they were doing with it,
Yeah.
and asking, okay, are we doing the right thing? Are we using the right provider, the
Yeah.
data processor? And for some company, it was a huge undertaking.
Oh,
And
yeah.
another thing I have so is because I did some mission with some client, and which entailed training the whole company. And people are really keen to follow the rules. And so it helps a lot of people, especially developers. Developers were very interested in this privacy thing, to have some kind of a framework to think about privacy. How do you um, build a product with privacy in mind?
Yeah.
And I think this was a good thing.
Yeah, I agree. I think that was the biggest impact of the whole GDPR. It's at least for in our company, it really put these topics of privacy and how long do we keep the data and do we really need the data um, on top of everybody's mind. It's similar, I feel, to security, right? Where
Yeah,
you could write
it's kind of,
software that is easy to hack, or if you know about it and you care about it and it's top of mind, then you'll write software that is harder to hack, right?
right,
Similarly here.
exactly. And it's kind of meet in the middle, because one of the article of GDPR says that you have to enforce the security uh, for the sake of the data, but it's a security at large. It's the whole software, especially when you're building software.
Yeah. So I want to go back to something you said later, but another thing that happened recently is that Privacy Shield was invalidated, right? So can you
Right.
explain a little bit what it is and what happened?
Yeah. So if you went through the whole GDPR dance, I think you read at least one time or two about this Privacy Shield, because this is the mechanism which lets you flow the data of European people from Europe to United States. The thing is, this Privacy Shield was, to put it gently, not much more than a fig leaf on top of a really big difference between European laws and US laws. European laws are very concerned about privacy. It's like an article of the European Constitution. The right of privacy for people, and meaning the right of not being spied on us by governments. US law does not have this concept of privacy. That means that the government, the federal US government, can help itself and serve and access any data he wants about anyone. So the Privacy Shield tried to put some rules on that, but what happened, it was negotiated by the European Commission, because you understand that for business, you need this free flow of data from Europe to US. And then the European Court of Justice, which is top legal thing in Europe, said, well, no, your thing does not protect European citizens from the prying eyes of US government. This means that you can, if the government, the US government access your data, you have no way of asking for reparations.
Right.
So,
so basically they said it was the shield, meaning it was not a real thing. It was only in wording. And so they said that's not valid. So now what happens? I mean, if we want to send customer data to the US, how can we do that?
Well,
properly?
the thing is, when the invalidation happened in July last year, the European Court of Justice said it's effective right now. So all the data processing agreement you signed under the Privacy Shield were invalid. And so, but they said, okay, but you can still send data from Europe to US under the standard contractual clauses. But this thing is not accessible for small company, because basically what you have to do is discuss on one-on-one with your provider to make sure they will give you enough guarantee about the data you're sending to them about privacy. So you don't have the power to discuss this as a small company.
I see. So it gets replaced by private contracts between the European entity that wants to send the data and whoever you're sending it to for processing, right?
Okay. Yeah. Okay. This is right. Yes, this is that.
Wow. So for every vendor that you use in the US, you have to have one of these contracts, and it has to say, yes, we agree that we will protect it, and we will tell you if the government asks for it. That kind of thing.
So this is the rub here. The US government has a law saying, basically, I'm not a lawyer, but basically, we can access any data we want, and we won't tell you, and you are not allowed to tell your customer.
Oh, that's
And
nice.
if you read closely, for example, the term of service of Amazon, AWS, it's written black and
That's
white.
if that's the law, that's what they have to do,
Yes,
right? Yeah.
yes, and which brings you to your next question, I guess.
Yes, right. Because people are saying, well, then I don't want to send any of my data to the US. Can we have data residency in Europe for my account? Right.
Yeah. So this you ask me, okay, what's this thing of residency? Is it really a thing
Right.
about like security theater, or I think it's more like I would put it like a legal and economic dogfight between Europe and US, because the thing is, everybody now understands the importance of data,
Right.
especially personal data, because of ads, basically.
Right.
So, and plus security, because with this data residency, this is a way for government to have better access to
Ah,
personal data under the law of the country.
under the
But
local law. Right. I see.
but still, you still have to think about that. If you are using a US provider, so the US provider is a company who has to apply US law,
Right.
no matter where the server, the data center are located.
Right.
If you are using Amazon, Microsoft, Google, it's all American company under American laws.
Right. So that's why I feel like we're kind of stuck in the middle of this big battle as small companies, right? Because sure, we could provide a local version of our, a European-based version of the database, but if you use Stripe, right, that goes through the US, and that's your credit card information. That's your personal information. If we have a support person in the US and we want them to be able to help you, they have to access your data from the European database, but it goes to the US so that they can read the data so that they can help you, right? So really, what's the point of even offering a European database if you have any sort of contact with the US, which most companies do? I mean, you'd have to be a fully 100% European company, only using other European vendors in order to be fully compliant, right?
Well, you could say that.
And that's super
I think there is
costly. And that's
there is a difference between having a cloud provider which store your data, and having an employee in US accessing your data from Europe. I think it's two different topics.
okay.
And you could say, yes, right, right at the moment, is I think it's kind of complicated, and a lot of bigger company are thinking about having their own data center to just be compliant. But also, you can think about this as a force to force European company to put on the market offering,
Right.
cloud offering that we
Right.
lack, in fact.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You have
Wow.
some. In fact, the European Commission, I guess, just published a working draft for European cloud provider framework.
Yeah.
So there is this big will in Europe to have an offering, a cloud offering, having the
Right.
European rules.
Right. Well,
Yes, it's
interesting.
an economic thing,
Yeah,
basically, for me.
it seems like we are navigating in a very evolving field of politics and economics, and we try to have to do our best to do the right thing, but also it's kind of scary because it changes all the time, and how can
Yes, to
you
be
do the right thing?
compliant all the time
Yeah,
and
if
being right in the
right.
uh,
So if you were to start, a small SaaS in Europe or in the US, but with some person in the US to do support at least, right? So
mhm.
even a small company, like how would you, what would you do in order to start on the right foot? What kind of processes are super important, and what other ones are, they can nice to haves? Um,
Okay, yeah. So I guess the first thing to ask yourself is, do I need the data? The less data you have, the less problem you have to deal with. And apart from that, choose your providers wisely, because you want to know what your provider are doing with your data, where the data is stored, because as we said, this is kind of a thing you need to know. And be very clear, make sure to inform in the best way possible your customer or client or user about what you do with the data. So you're very transparent with it. So it forces you also to not do some shady thing because it's easier and maybe we'll take care of that later. And after that, you have to clean up the mess. So if you start with that and making sure you choose a small set of provider where you know very well what you are doing with them, except that the fact that you certainly will be using user providers, US providers. So we are kind of like right now stuck in the middle of a thing which you are not uh, um, you will not be able to sign standard
right,
contractual clauses with every provider. I don't
right,
see it right now. So
right,
you have to be aware of that. But if you have a SaaS business like a lot of us have, where basically what you're collecting is email addresses, name, and not, not much more than that. Um, it's, it's not like if it's health data, for example,
right,
or judicial data
right,
or financial data.
right.
So the less data you have, the better it is.
Yeah. So you don't have that much data. You treat it in a normal way, right? So a lot of SaaS, they're not ad based, they're not data, they don't
Yes,
sell the data. They just
yes,
sell a product, and they just
yes.
they need the email so that people can log in, really, right?
Great. Yes. So it's not that much data. Uh, so, for example, we had this case 2 years ago in France where a startup started to build SDK to put into a mobile application to track geolocation for people and was selling this geolocation data. And as you may expect, the CNIL, so the French Data Protection Enforcement, said, no, you can't.
Right,
But most of our SaaS businesses are more B2B
right.
oriented, and you don't have that much
Yeah,
personal data
yeah.
to process.
And also, when I read the GDPR law, and it's not like there's always a warning first, and it's a gray
Yes.
area. They will fine you depending on how many data records you leaked, or
Yeah, but it's
how sensitive it
okay.
is.
Yes, and it's very progressive.
Right,
Well, if you have a very big leakage and you are very much responsible for it because you didn't take care of the security, yes, you are in trouble.
right,
But most of the time, it's very progressive. You first speak with the data authority, and then you try to make it right. And the fine is really the last step.
right.
But yes, you may be a small company, but if you did something real bad, you will be fined.
Oh, for sure, for sure. So, okay, so basically have a clear privacy policy, transparent, where
Yes.
you explain exactly what you're going to do with the data, what kind of data you have, you're going to keep, how long you're going to keep it, and all that, right?
Mhm.
And
Right.
then try to do an ethical business, right? That makes
Yes.
everything easier, right? um and then I think that it's important to say that you're never going to be 100% compliant because the
No.
law changes every day.
Yes.
you know
Think
but don't
about it
worry about it.
process.
Yeah,
And if you are in the process of hiring people, make sure that everyone in the company is trained
right,
about privacy
right. Do
because
you
it makes
have
things
any
easier.
resources that you suggest for doing this kind of training?
Go to my website,
Okay, well,
GDPR
that's
for
good.
SaaS.
Yeah, you have some articles there.
Yes, I have articles and slides also, and maybe a link to one of my talk in in one of the conferences we talk about at the start, I guess.
Excellent. So the website is GDPR number 4 SaaS dot EU. Okay, excellent, great. So now one thing that you mentioned is kind of worrisome for small companies because a lot of us do software for other small companies, right? So, but you said that when you start, you should have a small number of vendors that you should use because those vendors, the fewer you have, the lower the risk that they will leak your customers' data, right? So
Right.
if you have to have only a small number of vendors, you probably want to pick big vendors like AWS, right? And AWS has 500 different services, right? And you pick them, and then you have access to all these services. Now, if some other SaaS, if my SaaS is doing a little something that competes with AWS, now
Okay.
we have this problem as well, right?
Yeah, I understand. Maybe um, I didn't. Can we say that in a clear way? In my experience, there is no such thing as we will pick a bigger one. I had a lot of different company of different sizes, even small one, reaching out to me because they were asked by one of their customer, we were bigger than them, to be compliant. So it does not seem that if you are a smaller company, you will not be picked. It does not seem that. And maybe I said pick a smaller number of vendor because it's easier. It may I should say it's not pick a smaller number. Pick vendor that you choose carefully, where you go in details about what they are doing with their data, because you don't want to have to backpedal
Right,
because you understand some later down the road that, well, maybe they are not that compliant.
right, right.
It's much more this way.
Yeah. Well, let me tell
If
you,
it's
us Balsamic, we have been actively trying to trim down our third-party vendors list. Um,
okay,
and so we have replaced some small startups with something that
bigger
we
ones.
brought in-house, and we
Oh,
run
okay.
it on AWS because AWS, you can't escape. That's a vendor that you're gonna have, right? And so we run services there, and we even pay more than before. And we're sad that we don't support small vendors anymore. But I believe that it looks much better in our privacy policy if there's only few big players. You remember they used to say no one ever got fired for choosing IBM, right?
Yes, right.
And so
So,
you know, I have mixed feelings about this because as a
mhm.
small software provider, I don't want other people to do that to me.
I guess, yes. So you prefer to um, put everything in most of the thing you do in AWS instead of having a lot of different vendors because it was easier to you for you to manage the whole relationship between all the UN vendors.
There's that, but also because I feel like it looks better. If somebody's looking at my privacy policy and they look at the list of all my vendors, if they only see
Yes.
five
Mm-hmm.
big names, then
Mm-hmm.
they can trust that those big names have good security policies, good privacy policies, because they're big and they have to. You know, having a bunch of small unknown startups in my third party list doesn't look very good to my customers.
Oh, okay. But you are not obliged by the GDPR to disclose the whole list of your vendors.
Oh, really?
You just have to say which category of vendor you are using.
Huh. And not which one? That seems I didn't know about this. Okay.
Yeah,
It doesn't seem very transparent.
I know. I agree.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, the other thing with the GDPR that could be a problem with for smaller companies is uh, the associated costs, right? There's the training of everybody. There's the constant auditing, making sure that you know, every few months you look at what's in the database and how did it get there and is it appropriate, yes or no, right?
Mhm,
There is we established a very lightweight DPIA process, data
mhm,
processing impact assessment. So
mhm,
before you start, or that means that before you start on a new feature, you make a checklist of, is this going to have privacy, personal data? How long are
mhm.
we going to save it for? Are they going to be able to delete it? Blah blah blah. Right. So it's a lot of costs that you have, and as a small company, you know, they have a bigger impact over your business. How do you deal with that? Is it just the way it is? I mean, if just the right thing to do.
Yeah, I understand. I would think that, as you said, it's the way it is, but it's also a way to help you produce better software
Right.
easier because you have to put these processes in places. Great, well, not great because it takes time and money, but on the other side, it forces you to look uh, very closely at the quality of your software.
It's like brushing your teeth. You just have to get in the
Kind of,
habit, and it's good for
yeah.
you, and you just have to do it.
So I know a lot of starting company just puts this um, process away for later. I'm not sure it's the best way to deal with it because anyway, at some point you will have to go back and
Right.
uh, so I think it's better to just, okay, embed this into your process right from the
From the
beginning.
beginning. Yeah.
So it's lighter at the beginning and it's ingrained into your way of doing things.
Yeah.
And so it does not cost that much.
Yeah.
But
I agree.
anyway, So
It took us a lot of effort to sort of set everything
yes,
in place,
yes,
but now
yes.
that we have most things in place, we don't even really notice. It's just part of how we do business.
Yes, it's a checklist, and
Yeah.
everyone has that in mind when doing new features. And plus, you have to think about like it's a world tendency. Every country in the world is following the GDPR and putting in place privacy laws. So yeah, it's a tendency because we were at a point where it was really not under control and it was hurting people.
Yeah, the Wild West. Yeah. So let's end on a positive note. What are
Yeah,
some of the benefits you saw that came out of GDPR?
yeah. So as I was saying, it forces a lot of company to think about the data and training the people about privacy. I think is a good thing, especially for developer, because it's well, my feeling was that developers were very keen to learn about what does it mean to have like a privacy first approach to development, and then it puts further question about accessibilities accessibility and usability, and what does our software do and what does this software do for people's life. And I think it's a very right time to think about that. And and then you see all the question people start to have about artificial intelligence, about the carbon footprint of uh, digital tool, and it's growing,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
Right.
So it's just uh, I think it's a way the world goes. We start with a new shiny thing, and it does a lot of different things. And if you uh, think about, for example, cars at the beginning were wild, and people were killed. And then laws and regulation were put in place just because there were too much of them. I think that we are at this point with software.
Yeah.
Software is not always nice and shiny and roses and unicorns. It
Right.
can also hurt people's life, and developers have a duty about thinking about that. Well, it's my opinion,
No,
my
I
strong.
agree. It's definitely a sign of maturity for our industry,
Mhm.
for the software industry, and I know regulation is a lot of people are allergic to that word in the software industry, especially since we haven't been regulated quite very little,
Never.
very little. But software is eating the world, and so its impact is
Yeah.
bigger, and so it's kind of inevitable. My only fear is that uh, this will be trouble for smaller vendors and will result in giant consolidation. You know, you talk about cars, there's not that
Mhm.
many car companies in the world, right? They keep
Yeah.
buying each other, and there's 7 or 8 big
Well,
ones, you know?
well, the difference is that to build car, you need a plant, and so you need investment. To build software, you need a table, a chair, and a laptop. So, and I'm yes, I think it may be more difficult for smaller software builder to sell to biggest company, but there are a lot of different company of a lot different sizes,
Right.
and especially for us small company, we are better equipped to sell to company like us.
Like ourselves. Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Absolutely. So there can be maybe a tiered system where there's the big enterprise vendors and the enterprises, and then there's just the sort of the smaller system, and there's probably plenty of room for everybody.
I guess, yes.
All right, well, that's all we have time for today. Thanks again, Aleth, for being on the show. If people want
Thanks
to
for
contact
having
you,
me.
oh, sure. If people want to contact you, how could they find you?
On my website, you have a link to email me, and even you also have my phone number.
Okay, excellent.
And so you can ping me on Twitter, but as per the experience, you may not have a response.
All right, all right. Yeah, social media is it's so last decade, huh? It's over.
Well, yeah, I don't know. Can we have some, quaint social media where you can only talk to your friends and not be, uh,
Targeted.
yeah, and not be pushed to into dumb scrolling your
Yes.
timeline forever.
Yes. Well, hopefully somebody will make one soon.
Yes,
Anyways, that could
I
be for
hope.
a whole other chapter, a whole other episode. All right. Well, thanks again, Aleth.
Thanks again also for this episode.
Bye.
Bye.